Welcome to the Brand and Market Podcast, where branding clarity meets marketing strategy. I'm your host, Allie Haney, founder of Brand and Market, a boutique agency dedicated to helping small businesses craft intentional brands and effective marketing plans. Each week, I share practical tips and insights to help you, especially those of you in real estate-related industries, build a standout brand to attract your brand's biggest fans. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Brand and Market Podcast. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. I am recording this episode at like 9 p.m. on a Thursday, and I am utterly exhausted, and I cannot wait to tell you why. So yesterday, I returned from a 4-day trip to Phoenix, Arizona, and I was in Phoenix, Arizona on work, which was super exciting. About 6 weeks ago, I came across this event called the Level Up Your Listing Summit, hosted by Natalie Palmer and Tatiana Taylor Tate. They are two powerhouse women. One is a designer, another is a coach and a podcast host, and they are both short-term rental owners. So Level Up Your Listing is an event that is all about, well, it says it in the name, leveling up your short-term rental listing. Now, with that being said, there were a couple of other speakers there that were not just directly related to short-term rentals, but all within the real estate investing realm. And before you're like, wait, what were you doing there? I just want to remind you guys that I do actually own a short-term rental. It is in Kentucky, and I co-host a second short-term rental that is in Virginia. It's my mother-in-law's house. And we actually had a short-term rental in North Carolina. It was the first house that only house that Caleb and I have ever bought together. And that was in Eastern North Carolina. So we had that running as a short-term rental for about 2 years before we ended up selling that, before we moved to Kentucky and making $100K profit on it. So that was really, really exciting. But I've been hosting / co-hosting since 2019. I'm 6 years deep into this Airbnb superhost life. And so of course, when I saw Level Up Your Listing, not only was it attractive to me as a host, it was also attractive to me because I have recently pivoted my own branding and marketing agency to serve realtors and short-term rental owners. So I was originally going to really focus on kind of like marketing my own business, the brand and market side of my business, with a secondary purpose of developing my own real estate like investment portfolio. Yes, I was interested in that portion of it. I love just, I'm a lifelong learner. I love just being educated in new things, especially things that I feel like I know, but always feel like I could know more. Short-term listings, short-term rentals is definitely one of those subjects. So anyway, I had just learned about the conference or the summit about 6 weeks prior to signing up. The more I try to dig to try and figure out where I initially found them, I cannot remember how they came across my algorithm. If it was on the For You page or if someone else sent them to me, I cannot for the life of me remember. However, when I saw Level Up Your Listing online, I immediately knew that I had to be in that room. And that's not a very common thing for me. Usually I'm a little bit wishy-washy. Should I go? Should I not go? And as soon as I saw it, I was like, Caleb, I have to go. I don't know what's pulling me there, but I have to go. And so I purchased my ticket. I got my plane ticket, my Airbnb, and it was a relatively last minute decision considering I think they announced the event maybe 9 months ago. So anyway, I want to tell you guys a little bit more about my experience at Level Up Your Listing. I think my normal style would be to go, speaker by speaker and tell you a synopsis of what they said, but I'm gonna take a turn that's a little bit not normal for me, and I'm gonna tell you about some of the emotions that I had, which I know that I kind of pride myself on being strategic and looking at the data and looking at the numbers, and that is all well and good, but as you'll hear throughout what I'm about to tell you, that sometimes that's not the only way to handle a situation. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So sort of one of the first things that everyone asks you at this type of event is, like how many properties you have, or where are your properties located? Where are you from? All of those things. And I was really nervous. I was there by myself, did not know anyone, not even as an acquaintance or an online friend, like literally just showed up and told myself that you got to be brave for 30 seconds to introduce yourself. After that, the conversation's easy. So that's what I did. And I ended up leaving with a really great group of friends. We're in a group text now, and it's like already like, sending each other properties and bouncing ideas off of each other for branding those properties. Like, a couple of the ladies in the group are realtors, and asking them, picking their brain about certain questions. It was just a really great group of women. And it wasn't just women at the conference, but I would say it was probably about a 90-10 split between women and men. There were just a few guys there. These ladies are freaking powerhouses. They have properties all across the Eastern Seaboard: Tennessee, Georgia, Maryland, Asheville, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, like just everywhere across like my stomping grounds, which is funny because many of the people there were not just from the East Coast. I met people from Washington, from California, from Scottsdale, like right next door to where we were, all over the United States. So it was just a really cool experience to get in and meet new people. That kind of brings me to my first point of when I sat down and tried to determine what my word of the year was at the beginning of the year. My word of the year that I finally chose after just toiling over it and texting Cassie, my best friend, like about a million trillion times. She was probably like, just at that point, just choose one. Doesn't really matter. But the one that I ended up settling on was confidence. My word of the year was confidence. And I didn't know exactly how I wanted to put that into place, but I just knew that after the last couple of years of everything that happened in Kentucky, if you want to learn more about the nitty-gritty details of our time in Kentucky, please visit, I believe it's episode 3. I will link it in the show notes. Then you're able to learn a little bit more about that. But my confidence was absolutely rocked after Kentucky. My confidence in my decision-making, my confidence in myself, my confidence in just trusting my gut, trusting my research, like everything about it it shook me. And it's taken me a long time to stand back up after Kentucky. I quite honestly feel like I'm just now coming out of the Kentucky fog. And during that episode that I spoke all about it, the experience there, I tried to frame it as a learning experience, not as the big, ugly F word of failure. And I think there are tons of valuable things to be learned from while we were in Kentucky, but sometimes I got to look at it what it is, right? It failed. The idea that we purchased the property for, that does not exist today. So after all of that, I just had to find a way to look deep down inside of myself and regain that self-confidence. When I decided to purchase a ticket to level up your listing, I felt like that was the first really tangible action that I had taken to live up to my word of the year, was buying a ticket to an event where I didn't know another soul. I had not even heard about that event prior to 6 weeks before the event happening. Many of the women there were more diligent about connecting online beforehand. And I had joined like their online membership group. They have the Long Weekend Society, and that is other short-term rental owners. And so I had kind of, been a fly on the wall in that online group, but I hadn't reached out and really like introduced myself to anyone specific. So I was going in blind. Like when I walked into the welcome party on the first night, I was just like, fuck it. I guess I got to talk to people that I don't know. And so immediately I walked up to a booth that was hosted by Summer-Led Designs. They were one of their sponsors. And I just introduced myself to Sophia. And Sophia and I had lovely conversations throughout the entire event. And quite honestly, I'll never forget the kindness that Sophia showed me as soon as I walked in the door. So that was a really tangible way that I have enacted my word of the year of confidence. The second tangible way, and then quite honestly, this felt like an out-of-body moment. Okay, let me start at the beginning. So on day 3, it was the second full day of education, and they had what was called the Rising Stars panel. And I had looked over the speakers and looked over the itinerary before, but somehow I had like skipped over the Rising Stars panel. I don't know if there was a description about it or not, but like during lunch, I looked down and realized that I didn't know what that was. And so when I sat down, it was a pleasant surprise that Natalie and Tatiana have very closely followed the attendees of previous years of Level Up Your Listing Summit. This is their third year putting it on. So last year was the first year that they had the Rising Stars panel. I was obviously not there. So this year it was all new to me, but they follow the attendees that come to Level Up Your Listing, and they basically choose 4 people that they feel like have made extremely great strides in their businesses. And they don't tell these individuals beforehand. They kind of put them on the spot a little bit to talk more about their businesses. And those rising stars this year, there were 4 of them, like I mentioned. Just to give you, I don't want to steal their stories, but I would love to be able to spotlight their stories. To give you a quick overview, one of them was from Vancouver, and Vancouver had recently changed their laws around short-term rentals, and that she was a co-host of, I think she said 20 plus properties, and that like rocked her world because all of a sudden her clients were getting, spooked that the fact that, Vancouver was putting all these fines and restrictions on short-term rentals. And so she didn't really know where to go. And instead of sitting there and kind of wallowing, I guess, which is what I did when I was in Kentucky and my plan didn't work out, she literally moved to Mexico and restarted her business from scratch. Like, I cannot imagine the resilience and the bravery, the courage that had to have taken. But she is thriving, and I don't really even know her, but I'm just proud of her. The second individual, she had, I believe she said 2 properties last year, and she has, I don't do percentages, but now she has like 13 or 15 properties. So she's like, I don't know, 10x basically the properties that she owns / co-hosts. She's grown her business exponentially in 365 days. And I think the interesting part of her story specifically is that when she came to her first Level Up Her Listing Summit, she was like, I think 19. So that was only 3 years ago. She's 22 years old, owns multiple properties, co-hosts multiple properties. And she is the kindest, sweetest human. She's an inspiration to everyone, like, her age, that it can be done and it can be done gracefully. The third is, to my knowledge, she doesn't own any short-term rentals, but she does short-term rental setup. She realized that there was a gap in the market last year, and she decided to create a business basically where she comes in and enacts the design, sets up the entire short-term rental, and she does it in 7 days. So let's say you have a designer that has designed your short-term rental. They order all of the products, the furniture, all of that. Well, she's the one that actually sets up the products. Install, that's the word I'm looking for. She installs all of the design elements, all of the furniture, and she can do it all within 7 days. That is pretty much her whole business model, which is absolutely wild to me. Do you know how much work goes into that? So she said that she wanted to 3x her business, and she very quickly hit that goal all in 1 year. The fourth individual, she co-hosts properties as well. She ended up partnering with a real estate brokerage. She then realized that that real estate brokerage was taking a portion of her revenue. And when she went to go leave that real estate brokerage, the real estate brokerage basically said, like, you have a non-compete, you can't take your clients with you. So she built up her business, and unfortunately she ended up doing that twice. Built up her business twice, left 2 real estate brokerages before she realized she can really go out on her own. And she has built her business 3 times over and is bigger and better than ever before. And multiple of them had stories, maybe not all of the rising stars, but I've heard multiple stories through Instagram stories or through talking to people in person, hearing this rising star on the stage that said, I was vastly overwhelmed when I came to this event last year. I was onboarding clients while I was here. I was answering Airbnb messages while I was here as a host, like co-host, and my team has grown and I no longer have to worry about that. So I am fully present here at this event this year, and I owe that to the strategies that I learned last year at this event. You all know that I co-founded ESC Events with Cassie. I am no longer part of ESC Events. I have decided to step away from it. However, that knowledge of what it takes to bring an event like this to life is and this event was almost 10 times the size of the event that we put on. We hosted 30 women. They hosted 300 people. It's just absolutely incredible. And I know how rewarding it is as a hostess of an event specifically to see those ripple effects that you were able to cause. And I hope that Natalie and Tatiana see the ripple effects, not only in their rising stars, but in every attendee that came to level up your listing. As I was putting myself out there and having the conversations with people, I only met a handful of people that were like me and that this was their first year. Multiple people told me that this was their second or third year that they had been with Natalie and Tatiana from the beginning. That is truly a testament to the value that people see in this event. Not only like the value of the education, but also the value of the networking and the relationships that you bring out of it. Like I said, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a super nerd for education. But the network that has been established, I believe it is only the beginning, because I can't speak for other attendees, but personally, I plan on continuing to reach out to other attendees that I wasn't able to get to speak to in person, but that I've seen, post about level up your listing or post about it on their stories or their feed. But let me bring this back around to my word of the year of confidence. So I had been wanting to introduce myself to Natalie and Tatiana. I wasn't able to speak to Tatiana. As an event host, you are very, very busy, but I was able to get in touch with and meet Natalie at the very end of the event. Like, things were wrapping up. The sponsors were packing up their booths. And I walked up to her and just said, "Hey, my name is Allie. I wanted to introduce myself and thank you for putting on this amazing event." I don't want to step too much on one of my future points, but I said, I really identify with your opening presentation. I'll tell you more about that in a second. And mark my words, I will be on your Rising Star panel next year. And it felt like an out-of-body moment when I was so bold. The 2022 version of Allie would never have said that. And the fact that I don't have a fucking plan of how I'm going to be a rising star, but I will make it happen. And I am not a manifester. I'm not that person, but something about this event just shifted the way that I think and I feel about myself and my business. Like I said, mark my words, I will be on that Rising Star panel next year. And you know what she did? She took out her phone and was like, "What's your Instagram again?" I'm on her radar. I hope that's a good thing. And I hope that I fulfill that very confident remark. And I have faith and confidence in myself that I will. It was absolutely freaking bold. And I love myself for it. So that's one of my 5 points that I want to make. So I'm going to try and hurry up with this because I'm already at 20 minutes of this recording. So let's go to the next point. The next thing that I want to touch on is the conversation or the presentation that Seth and Tori Bolt presented. So if you don't know who Seth and Tori Bolt are, they are pretty darn big in the short-term rental world. They own Bolt Farms, and that is in Tennessee. They have luxury tree houses, mirror cabins, and I think glamping tents. Oh gosh, now I'm butchering it. But they own basically a full mountain in Tennessee, and they have quite the story of how they got to where they are in their $32 million business today. So I had been following Seth and Tori for a few months. Actually, before I found Level Up Your Listing, I had heard of them prior, just, by being in the short-term rental world and their story being such a come up story. But I had not heard all of their story. So as they were up on the stage, they told us sort of the beginnings of how Bolt Farms came to be. And so I might be getting some of the years off because I don't have my notes from their presentation directly in front of me. However, long story short, around 2015, I believe that's when they got married. Seth had built this really cool, like luxury treehouse for Tori, and it was part of like their honeymoon. And then once they were done with it, as their like honeymoon stay, wedding, they converted it into a short-term rental. They did really, really well with that short-term rental. And so they decided to continue on and make this into like a real thing. They purchased property in Charleston, South Carolina, where they built 4 more of those luxury tree houses just to have Charleston change the laws and the restrictions surrounding short-term rentals so that they were no longer able to actually use the tree houses that they had built. So as Seth put it, I had commercial property that had no commercial value. And when I was sitting there in the audience listening to them talk about what it was like to be at that low, I almost started crying. Like I might start crying right now. I literally had to wipe a tear from my eye because I was sitting in this room of 300 people that I didn't think anyone had ever had the same experience of me, of feeling like I invested so much money into this, so much time, so much research, so much heart and soul into a project just to have it ripped away for something that is totally outside of my control. And as I sat there and listened to them, I was like, I had no idea that that was part of their story. Like I only saw the $32 million business in Tennessee story. And so then they went on to say they had gotten out of that and then were trying to purchase this, move on from Charleston. They found this property in Tennessee on the top of a mountain for $250,000. And they didn't have any money to their name because they had just gone all in on this other, the tree houses in Charleston, South Carolina. So they were trying to figure out a way to make this dream work because they knew that this is the space they were meant to be in. And that's kind of where I feel like I am now, just trying to figure out what that next step is and having the confidence to be able to trust myself again. So they ended up purchasing that $250,000 property and couldn't get a bank loan, or they didn't purchase it. They were still under contract, but hadn't closed on it yet. Trying to get a bank loan to be able to do the construction of the treehouse units at this property in Tennessee. And Seth was like, I gotta do something. I gotta do something because the bank wasn't going to give him a loan. He ended up selling $1 million in reservations prior to closing on the property in Tennessee to prove the concept and to prove the interest in this idea to the bank. And he did. They sold $1 million in reservations. He said he was hoping for $500K. He ended up hitting $1 million in reservations in less than a month for a property that he didn't even own yet. And I'm like, wow, shoot the shot, dude. Like it was an inspiration. And the line that stuck with me and with others, because I was overhearing other people like have this similar conversation as well. This line stuck with a lot of us. Success is a poor teacher. Success is a poor teacher. And sometimes I wonder where we would be right now if Kentucky had gone the way that I thought it would. Can guarantee you that I'd probably be a cocky bitch. Like, I have learned so very much from my time in Kentucky. So much. And it really encouraged me to not only be confident in myself and my decisions again. It not only encouraged me to trust myself and my decision-making abilities, it also encouraged me to sit down and really reflect on the time in Kentucky, because I feel like I always say Kentucky taught me a lot. I learned a lot in Kentucky, but could I sit down and say I learned X, Y, and Z? I don't know that I could. I mean, maybe like zoning laws and stuff like that. Sure, I know better questions to ask, even though I had already asked those questions before Kentucky even started. But like, I am going to sit down and write down the lessons that I learned from Kentucky. I wouldn't have done that probably had I not heard Seth and Tori talk about how success is a poor teacher. Like, I need to I need to reflect on that failure of Kentucky. I need to pull out those lessons that I learned, not only about real estate investing, zoning laws, all those nitty-gritty things, but also what I learned about myself, because Kentucky changed me. And I don't know that I've sat down and processed all of those internal emotional changes. And I was even lucky enough to be able to speak directly to Tori Bolt, and asked her, how she gained that trust and that confidence back in herself. And she just really encouraged me to pray. And it's not really funny, but it's a kind of a God wink to me that she said that, because I have said in the past that the two best things, or the only two good things that came out of Kentucky, were our son Emerson. He was born while we were in Kentucky, and the fact that Kentucky brought me closer back to God, back to my faith. We found a really amazing church in Kentucky, and I actually did start praying on a regular basis. So I was like, you know what, you're right. Even though I feel like I took a step in the right direction while we were in Kentucky, because when you're down and out and you don't have anything to cheer you up or to look forward to, it drives you closer, pushes, pulls, whatever adjective you want to use, it brings you closer to God. And so I was like, you know what, maybe I took a step in the right direction, but I'm not all the way there yet. And so that was a really powerful conversation that I was able to have with Tori. And like I said, it just kind of is changing my perspective on how I look at the time in Kentucky based off of that. Are you feeling stuck when it comes to your branding or marketing strategy? Do you have a million ideas but no clear direction on where to start? Then it sounds like a Power Hour session would be perfect for you. This is a focused one-on-one video call designed to tackle your biggest branding or marketing challenges. Here's how it works. You schedule a call, share some of your business details and any burning questions you have ahead of time. Then during our session, we dive straight into solutions. No fluff, no generic advice, just tailored strategies that work for you and your business. Whether you're a realtor looking to stand out in a crowded market, a short-term rental owner creating a repeat guest experience, or a builder needing clarity on your messaging, the Power Hour is designed to help you walk away with actionable steps to grow your brand. Are you ready to take the guesswork out of your branding and marketing? Let's tackle it together. Visit the link in the show notes to book your Power Hour session today, and let's turn your ideas into intentional action. So the next thing that I want to talk about is something that Isaac French said. For those of you who don't know who Isaac French is, he was the owner and co-founder of Live Oak Lake in Texas. It was just outside of Waco. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his story, because that's going to lead me into the more reflective part of what I have to say about his presentation. Live Oak Lake is a micro resort. It is built on a man-made lake on the 5-acre lot outside of Waco. It has, I believe, 7 dwellings, 7 short-term rentals on it, all scattered around. And one of them has, one of the things that really caught my attention was it has this container pool, a pool made out of a shipping container. And it is so cool. It is so cool. You'll have to look it up. So he was telling us about the process of how they went through the construction, how he got the bank loan. He mentioned that when he started this idea, he was a bookkeeper and he was making $60K a year. So an honorable salary, but not anything that's going to garner him a $2.3 million loan from the bank. And so he was searching around for a piece of property that he could bring this vision that was inside of his head to life. And he said that he walked onto this 5-acre property and he just knew. He just felt it. And he knew that he had to basically do anything to make this vision come to life. And so he had gone to the bank. The bank had denied him. He went to multiple banks denied him. He ended up finding a way to finance it with the help and cosign of his family, which he gave some equity to. And they began the construction process. Well, this construction process hit some hiccups, as it always does, but they were able to eventually bring this property to life. And once they brought this property to life and began to go out to get bookings, Airbnb, without explanation, took them off their site. And so he had no way to, quote unquote, market this absolutely beautiful micro resort property with 7 dwellings on it, but he was still having to pay that bank note. So he pivoted, created this very in-depth brand, did influencer partnerships, garnered tens or hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram, created the direct booking site so that people could book directly with them and not have to go through Airbnb. And something that looked like a huge detriment to his business ended up being the biggest blessing to his business, because he said himself that he doesn't know if he would have grown the brand the way he did had he not been forced to do so. So go on, he ended up getting back onto Airbnb just to be taken off again with no explanation. But at that point, all of the bookings were direct bookings anyway. He was at 100% direct booking rate, which is very, very rare in this business. He created this brand. He had the direct booking site, email marketing list, all those things. And less than a year in, they decided, hey, what if we put this on the market? And so they put it on the market at $6.5 million. And I might be getting some of the numbers wrong, but this is generally how it went. They got an offer for 6.5. They were going through with it. And then just days before the closing, the deal fell through. And so they went back on their merry way, still with their bookings, all of those things. And then a year later, once they had a full year of numbers, they listed it at $7.5 million just to see if they could get it, just out of curiosity. They ended up getting an offer for $7 million, and that deal closed. Within less than 2 years of Live Oak Lake being in existence, they sold it for a massive profit. Massive profit. One of the things that throughout that entire story that stuck out to me was when he said he walked onto that property and he just knew. This is a bookkeeper that's sitting here and telling me that it's not just about the numbers. There's something to be said for intuition. There's something to be said for trusting your gut. I swear that this is exactly what I need to hear. This goes back to the word of the year of confidence. This goes back to me not being able to trust myself for the last 2 years because I feel like Kentucky has failed so miserably. I can't tell you how much I needed to hear that. And looking back on it, it's so funny how I can see the transition in myself from where I went from trusting myself to being so reliant on numbers, to being so reliant on a spreadsheet for myself to know and understand and believe, because I used to have the confidence to be able to bravely go in the direction that I thought was right. But now it's like I have to revert back to numbers and strategy, and it has to be that way for me to be able to trust it. So that leads me into my next point of walking into this conference. The first thing I did was introduce myself to Sophia at Summerled Designs. The second thing that I did, because that was the second booth that I encountered, was go and learn more about the short-term rental book club. So I've already said multiple times, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a nerd at heart. I was an English major in college and an English teacher my first year out of college. So I see this bookcase full of beautiful books, and I see a fellow book lover. So I sit down and talk to her. Once I sit down and talk to her, she mentioned, the books on the shelf were previous short-term book club books. They had extra inventory, so she was selling them for $5. On this bookshelf, I had seen, I read all the titles or whatever. I had read already about 1/3 of them. And then I continued to look, and I saw 2 books that I had on my list, my to be read list, but haven't read them yet. And I was like, where else am I going to find hardbacks for $5 each? So I go to pull those 2 books off the shelf. But then this other book catches my eye. It's bright like lime green, and it's called Alchemy. And I'm like, how is a book called Alchemy related to short-term rentals? So I pull it out, and it says it's all about the dark magic in branding and business. And I'm like, this is kind of piquing my interest. I'm in the branding and marketing world. Like, I have read a lot of branding books, and none of them quite caught my attention like this one did. So I didn't even read the back cover like I always do. I didn't read the first chapter like I sometimes do. Instead, I only had room really in my suitcase for two books. I was like, if I buy any more than this, then I'm not going to be able to fit them and take them home. I'm going to have to go to the post office and ship them back to my own house. Instead of buying one of the books that's been on my to be read list for quite some time, I randomly swap out this alchemy book with it. Okay, so I buy those two books. Fast forward to my plane ride home. I'm like, I don't know which one I want to read first. I'm not currently reading a book, so I'll just read first chapters of each of these. The other one was Unreasonable Hospitality, and every short-term rental owner, every business owner that has read that book loves that book. Never heard of alchemy before, so I thought for sure Unreasonable Hospitality is going to be the one that's going to win this out. Guess what? Unreasonable Hospitality did not win out. I opened that alchemy book and it was talking about how basically there needs to be a little bit more magic brought back into the world, not just branding, not just marketing, but into the world. And the author gives an example of how sometimes the rational idea is not the idea that works. The rational solution is not the solution that works. So to give you a quick example of what, an illustration of this in practice, is that he did a test where a charity went through and hand delivered envelopes to collect donations to individual houses. And there were 4 different envelopes in that stack that were all passed out. So it was a blind test, so to speak. The first envelope that was passed out was the most logical envelope. And that envelope said on there, for, every dollar that you donate, you get 25% tax write-off. Okay. Logically, that should be a motivator. The tax write-off should be a motivator for people to donate. The second one was an envelope that had copy on it that said this was dropped off by a volunteer or hand delivered by a volunteer, and we'll be back in a couple weeks to see, if you would like to donate to our cause. Third one was premium quality paper envelope, high quality, nice envelope. The fourth one was simply an envelope. Instead of it being a horizontal envelope with the flap on top, it was a vertical envelope, a long skinny one with the flap on top. So when they went to go collect those envelopes with donations, logically, rationally, it should be the one that would bring the biggest benefit to the person that's doing the donating, which would be the envelope that said you get a 25% tax write-off for every dollar that you donate. However, that envelope had the worst results. It had the fewest donations come back in that type of envelope. But guess which envelope won? It was that premium envelope with the really, really nice paper. And not only did that envelope come back with the most donations, it came back with the highest donations. Now, does that make sense? Not logical sense. But the point that he was trying to make is that none of us as humans make logical decisions. We make emotional ones. And while there's not any direct explanation or correlation of why that premium envelope warranted premium donations, there is just an intuition that goes about with it. And he says basically the point that he's trying to make is that in our world that is driven by numbers, that is driven by science, that is driven by proof and logic, sometimes we just got to make a little magic happen. We got to go left when we think we need to go right. We got to go zig when we think we should go zag. And that in combination, having just heard Isaac's presentation, just made me feel like, damn, this is so many signs that's just telling me to loosen the hell up. And then it actually brought up a conversation in my memory that I had with Cassie, the co-founder of ESC Events. I was, as the branding and marketing person, always in charge of the marketing strategy, social media strategy, all of that. It was a conversation. It was not meant, she was not meaning to intend to hurt my feelings at all. And really my feelings weren't hurt. However, she had mentioned that my strategy was so rigid. It was so formulated. It was so specific that it didn't really allow for creativity or fun. And she never said it specifically like that. However, like looking back on it, that's how I should have taken it because she was right. I was just reverting back to like the numbers and the strategy and the logic because I didn't trust myself to just be creative and think outside of the box. And so all of these tiny little signs, Tori and Seth talking about how success is a poor teacher and how she was able to trust herself again. How Isaac said you just need to kind of go with your gut and not let the spreadsheet rule your mind. How this alchemy book just happened to be the one that caught my attention that I had never heard of before, but that's the one that I picked up. And it's just like I told Caleb when I first saw this event, I was like, I have to be here. And I don't really know specifically why. I can't sit down and give you my XYZ PowerPoint slide presentation as to why I need to be here. But now it's like all of these intangible things, all of these small little God winks, like that's why I needed to be here, is I had to experience these things to start to trust myself again. And that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling reinvigorated. I'm feeling excited about stuff again. And you can probably even tell in my voice that I'm like talking quicker and not specifically toiling or choosing my words in this episode. I just feel more comfortable with myself again. Another part that kind of was being a recurring theme throughout the Level Up Your Listing Summit was we had multiple designers up there. We had multiple branding professionals, marketing professionals, a couple of other short-term rental owners that had really thrived in specific marketing channels. For instance, social media. The Pink Dreams Cottage owner, she was there and telling us all about her social media presence. And one of the through lines throughout the whole summit was tell your story, tell your story, tell your story. And I'm like, I don't want to tell my story. My story is depressing as hell. We spent $1.5 million on a property in Kentucky to have it not be able to do what we wanted to do with it after I did my due diligence and got threatened by the neighbors. Like, that's not a good story. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm ready to get on social media and just be like, here it is. Because I truly feel like if I do share the story, if I share it in a way that can be positive, then I think that it could be helpful to others. I don't want to be the person that hides all of the bad stuff and only shows the good stuff, but that's who I've been. I've been that way to seem polished, to seem professional. At this point, like I feel like I don't have anything to lose. I already lost it all in Kentucky. So what could happen? But I've been so scared to just be vulnerable and real. And I'm fine with telling the story about Kentucky. It just feels like now I can tell it from a place of confidence and learning and not of a place of like, woe is me. That's where I finally feel like I am. And it's taken me a very, very, 2025? Yes. So we decided it was in April of 2022 that we weren't going to do the venue. So it's taken me almost 3 years to get to that spot. But I do feel like I'm finally here and it feels damn good. But that brings me back to, I mentioned I was going to tell you more about Natalie's opening presentation. Natalie, again, is the co-founder of Level Up Your Listing. And she mentioned within this presentation or this speech that she said, she told Tatiana she felt like she needed to be in this very first speaking position. So on like first full day of education, she was the very first one to address us. And she was so vulnerable, so open about feeling like a fraud the past couple of years. And I told her when I was able to meet her that it could have been me up there talking. Like everything that she said were thoughts that I had inside my own head. Essentially what it came down to was she was hosting this podcast all about short-term rentals. She was coaching women on how to become short-term rental owners and co-hosts. And she herself had only one short-term rental property. First of all, I would argue only one is a disservice to her and everything she's done. Anytime you have an additional property to your home, I feel like that is an extreme achievement in and of itself. However, I understand where she was coming from because she's on this platform that, is all about acquiring more properties. And she was feeling like, I acquired the first one, I want to say like 6 years ago, and then never continued to build my portfolio like I'm encouraging all these other women to do. It just doesn't make sense. I could have been saying the exact same thing to myself in the context of the venue, in the context of my own branding and marketing agency. Like, it just felt like I was seen. Eventually, she brought the whole thing back around to the fact that none of these entrepreneurial passions that we have chosen are easy. None of them are distractions for, what we are meant to do. Instead, they lead us to what we are meant to do. They shape us into who we are as women, as business owners, as mothers, as spouses, as people. Like, everything that we encounter, everything that we choose to spend our time on is something that is meant to be in our lives for a specific reason. And I just remember like the applause at the end. I was like, could have been me saying those words. And for anyone out there that's feeling like an imposter, that's feeling like a fraud, you're still doing the damn thing. Like, one of the other panelists on a design panel said, I don't fake it till I make it. I make it till I make it. And I make it till I make it and success is a poor teacher are going to have to be 2 quotes that are just like written on my wall now. I just painted my office, but I might have to just, graffiti them across the wall in there. Just be prepared for me to continue to tell my story, not just about Kentucky, but about everything, life in general, homeschooling, and how, wearing all these different roles have, been a challenge, about the transition in my business from photography to wedding venue to brand and market as a branding and marketing agency, like all of those things. Oh, I remember the other point that I wanted to make about Natalie's speech is that I too have felt like I am having some entrepreneurial ADD with the podcast, with the transition in brand and market, with ESC, with co-hosting and hosting short-term rentals. Like, it's just, I do a lot of things. And it was funny that I was able to find birds of a feather at Level Up Your Listing, because it seemed like everyone had 5 things that they were doing at once. So I just felt more normal there. But as I was sitting there and thinking about like the future of brand and market and the future of our family and our family's goals of owning short-term rentals, possibly creating a micro resort, like just putting it into the universe so other people can hear it. And I was struggling trying to feel like I needed to focus on one thing or the other, because the other one venture was detracting from the next venture. And like, when I heard Natalie up there speaking, feeling the exact same way about her coaching business and the summit and the podcast and her short-term rental, I was like, no, she's right. Like, it doesn't have to be like I have all of my eggs in one basket and I have to have this one business as my main and sole identity. It might be that once I, get further into brand and market and a little bit more established, like maybe I will create like the bigger agency model so that I can reallocate funds that were brought in through brand and market to transition and start to reinvest or invest again in real estate. So, it's who's to say? Just this week, we were looking at 10 acres in Eastern North Carolina to possibly make that micro resort come to life. And my husband looked at me and was like, is this because you told Natalie you were going to be a rising star? And I'm like, kind of, maybe. But also, it's been a dream that's been on my heart for a little bit, but it's been in the deep dark since Kentucky went the way Kentucky did. So consider it a comeback? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where it takes us. But that brings me to my final point, which is that as I was sitting there and thinking about our time with short-term rentals, anytime I've been involved in a short-term rental since 2019, and how that involvement with short-term rentals was never my plan A. The house in North Carolina, we bought that house together in 2015, moved in 2018 with military orders, had it as a long-term rental for a year. Our long-term renters did not respect it the way we would have hoped they would. So I returned to the house with cat feces scattered all over the walls and black mold in the refrigerator. And I said, I cannot do this anymore. We're never going to have long-term renters again. Never say never. I won't say that we will never have a long-term rental, but it was a Hail Mary, a last-ditch effort to turn that property into a short-term rental. Otherwise, we were going to have to sell it. And we ended up running that Airbnb, that short-term rental, for 2 years and selling it at $100K profit, which was absolutely incredible, but still not my plan A. And then with the Kentucky house, we bought that property to be a wedding venue when we needed income to come off that property. After we realized that we were not going to be able to make the wedding venue work, we converted it into a short-term rental. Again, not my plan A, but every time I felt like our world was just like on fire. When we went back to that house, the long-term rental in North Carolina in 2019, and I saw the state that it was in, and I wish I could show you all pictures of that house. They stole our washer and dryer. There were holes in the walls. It looked like they had not cleaned in a year. They weren't supposed to have pets. There was clearly dog hair and cats everywhere. We had to rip out every inch of the carpet, right? I just felt like the whole world was falling down around me in this beautiful home, our very first home together, a home that I was very emotionally attached to. It rose from the ashes and ended up being like a really beautiful story. Same in Kentucky. I felt like our whole world was falling down around us. Our family was getting threatened. We weren't making any money off of this huge investment and realized that it wasn't going to work. And again, out of the ashes came a short-term rental. And I got, a little emotional there at Level Up Your Listing, kind of putting all these pieces together. Like, maybe this is where I'm meant to be in the short-term rental world. Like, why does it always have to be a Hail Mary? Why can't it be the plan A instead of plan B, C, or D? So that was a realization that I had while I was there. And I feel like I'm a little bit more open to the God winks. I'm not reverting back to the numbers in the spreadsheets quite so much. And it feels much more freeing. So all of that to say, mark my words, Level Up Your Listing team, Natalie and Tatiana, I will be a rising star next year. I've already bought my ticket, and it is March 29th to the 31st back in Phoenix, Arizona, the exact same venue on Jackson that we were at this year. If you are a short-term rental owner or a realtor or somehow interested in real estate investing, I challenge you to come. I would love to see you there and have you see me be on the Rising Stars panel. So with that, I hope you found one little nugget of knowledge that will help you be both the best in your brand and in your market. Signing off till next week. You just completed another episode of the Brand Market Podcast. If you found this helpful, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find this show and so that you never miss an episode. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for all the resources mentioned today. See you next Wednesday, and as always, I'm here cheering you on as you build your dream brand and business.